She asked me to help her build a swing set, just an afternoon favor. But when the sun went down, and she whispered, "It's just you and me tonight," I realized, some moments aren't about what you build with your hands, they're about what starts quietly in your heart. It started with a message on a quiet Friday morning, a polite request that felt harmless enough. "Would you have time tomorrow to help me assemble something in the backyard?" I didn't think much of it. She lived 2 houses down, always kind, always composed, the kind of woman who carried a calm around her that made people instinctively lower their voices. I'd helped her once before with a stubborn garden hose, and she'd repaid me with coffee and conversation that lingered longer than I expected. But this time, her message ended with a smiley face, a small thing, but somehow, it felt different. By the time I arrived at her place the next afternoon, the air was soft with that lazy warmth only late spring carries. A gentle hum of life filled the street, children shouting faintly somewhere down the block, the rustle of leaves in the old oak that shaded her yard. She stepped out of the doorway just as I turned up the path, brushing her hair back, sunlight catching on the gold strands. "There you are," she said, her tone light but carrying something that felt like relief. I smiled, lifting the small toolbox I'd brought. "You said something about a swing set." She nodded toward the patch of grass where boxes lay scattered, the kind that come with too many bolts and not enough instructions. "It's for my niece. She's visiting next weekend." I thought I could surprise her. Her words were simple, but the way she said, "I thought I could surprise her," carried a warmth I couldn't quite explain, like this swing set meant more than just a backyard toy. We started unpacking the pieces together. I tried to focus on sorting screws and aligning beams, but my attention kept wandering, to her quiet laugh when a bolt rolled into the grass, to the way her fingertips brushed against mine when she handed me the wrench. The air between us wasn't loud, it was steady, filled with small sounds, the clink of metal, the chirp of birds, the faint scrape of wood against the concrete patio. Every time she moved closer, it felt as though the day itself leaned in with her. After a while, she brought out 2 glasses of lemonade, beads of condensation glistening against the glass. "You didn't have to," I said, taking one. "I did," she replied softly. "You showed up." It wasn't flirtation. Not exactly. More like gratitude layered with something unspoken, something that felt like it had been waiting a long time to be noticed. When I looked up, she was standing by the fence, watching me with that calm, unreadable half-smile of hers. The kind that makes you want to look away, but can't. The sunlight traced her features, the gentle slope of her neck, the relaxed confidence in her stance. I remember thinking how strange it was, that 2 people could stand a few feet apart and yet feel the faint pull of something forming, slow, quiet, undeniable. A favor, that's all it was. But as she stepped closer to hand me another screw, her fingers brushed mine again, this time not by accident, not entirely. And in that small, wordless pause, I knew the afternoon had already shifted into something else. Something personal. Something that wouldn't end when the swing set was done. By midday, the sun had softened into that mellow warmth that makes time slow down. The yard smelled faintly of cut grass and wood polish, and a soft breeze played with the loose strands of her hair. We'd been working for an hour, maybe more, though neither of us had really noticed the clock. The instructions were useless, just a sheet of vague diagrams and numbers that didn't seem to match any of the bolts. I squinted at it, rotating the paper like maybe the problem was gravity, not my confusion. She laughed, that unguarded kind of laughter that shakes a little of your own tension loose. "You're holding it upside down," she said, eyes glinting with amusement. "I don't think that's the problem," I replied, pretending to be offended. This manual was clearly written by someone who hates joy. Her laughter deepened, warm and melodic. It wasn't loud, but it filled the space between us, made it lighter. For a moment, I forgot about the swing entirely, I just listened to the sound of her enjoying herself, the way her shoulders relaxed as she smiled. When she crouched beside me to sort through the screws, our knees almost touched. I could feel the warmth of her presence even though we weren't really close. She picked up one of the larger bolts, examining it, then glanced up at me with a teasing grin. "Maybe you just need supervision," she said. "Maybe you just enjoy bossing people around," I countered. Her eyes softened, and the smile that followed wasn't teasing anymore, it was quieter, almost thoughtful. "Maybe I just enjoy the company." That line stayed in the air longer than it should have. The breeze carried it gently, like a secret neither of us wanted to claim yet. We worked in silence for a while after that, the comfortable kind. Every now and then she'd hum softly, a tune I didn't recognize but didn't want to end. When I knelt to tighten a bolt, she reached over to steady the frame, her fingers brushing my wrist. It was the smallest touch, but it lingered. My pulse stumbled for a second before finding its rhythm again. "You okay?" she asked, half smiling. "Yeah," I said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Just making sure it's straight." She tilted her head, studying me with that quiet curiosity she had. Then she turned back to the swing, her hair falling slightly over her cheek. There was no need to say anything else, the silence between us already said enough. At one point, a screw rolled out of my reach. I bent to grab it, and she beat me to it, her hand covering mine for the briefest second. Her skin was cool, soft, the kind of touch that doesn't ask for attention but refuses to be forgotten. When we finally stood to look at our progress, half the frame was up, and the sunlight had shifted to a golden hue. She rested her hands on her hips, squinting at the swing like she was proud of it, or maybe proud of us. "Well," she said, "it's standing." "For now," I teased. Her laugh came again, softer this time. "You doubt me?" "Never," I said. And I meant it, more than I expected to. Somewhere between the laughter and the light, something quiet and easy had taken root, the kind of connection that doesn't announce itself. It just starts growing, right there beneath the trees, where no one else can see it happen. And somehow, I already knew this day was going to stay with me, not because of the swing, but because of the way she laughed beside it. By the time we tightened the last bolt, the sunlight had shifted into that late afternoon gold that seems to hold its breath before fading. The swing frame stood upright now, a little crooked, maybe, but still standing proudly in the yard. We both stepped back, admiring it like a shared secret we'd built together. She brushed her palms on her jeans, leaving faint dust streaks. "Not bad for two amateurs," she said, tilting her head at the structure. "Not bad at all," I replied, smiling. Though I'm still not sure which one of us actually followed the manual. She chuckled, a tired but content sound, then wandered toward the porch. "Let's take a break. My back needs mercy." We sat on the porch steps, the boards warm under us from the day's sun. She handed me a cold bottle of water, the kind gesture that somehow carried more intimacy than words. For a few minutes, we just sat in silence, letting the day fade around us. The yard had gone still, only the faint buzz of crickets and the creak of the new swing in the soft wind. The air had cooled, brushing gently against the skin. It felt like the world had slowed to match our rhythm. "You know," she said quietly, staring out at the swing set, "I used to have one just like that. Same color, even. My dad built it for me." I glanced at her, the soft edge in her voice pulling me in. "That why you wanted to build this one?" She nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah. Maybe I just wanted her to have the same kind of happiness I did. That feeling of flying, even when your feet never really leave the ground." Her eyes stayed on the swing, but I could tell her thoughts were far away, somewhere between memory and longing. The fading sunlight caught her profile, and for a brief moment, she looked younger, freer, like the years had loosened their grip on her. "It's a good memory, then," I said softly. She turned to me, her gaze steady. "It is. But it's also one of those memories that make you realize how much time has passed." There was no sadness in her tone, only a quiet honesty. The kind that sits deep in the chest and doesn't need comforting, it just needs to be heard. I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. So I didn't say anything. I just sat there beside her, letting the silence hold us both. The sun finally slipped behind the trees, and in that last band of amber light, her hand rested lightly beside mine on the step. Not touching, just close enough that I could feel its warmth. After a moment, she leaned back on her hands and exhaled. It's nice, not rushing. Just existing for a while. Her words hit something simple but true in me. I hadn't realized how rare stillness had become in my life, how long it had been since I just sat with someone and let the quiet mean something. The light faded into soft violet, shadows stretching long across the yard. She glanced at me, her eyes reflecting the last of the day. You're quieter than usual, she said, smiling faintly. Just thinking, I murmured. About what? I met her gaze, holding it for a moment longer than I should have. About how some days feel different. Like they're trying to tell you something. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. And what do you think this one's saying? I thought about answering, but the words didn't come. Instead, I just smiled, because maybe she already knew. The air between us was warm, steady, and full of something that didn't need a name yet. And as evening finally took hold, it felt like the day wasn't ending, it was just changing shape. Night crept in quietly, the way it does when you're too lost in a moment to notice the sky changing. The last of the daylight had vanished, leaving a soft indigo wash across the yard. A few porch lights flickered on down the street, distant and warm, but here it was just the two of us, surrounded by the faint hum of crickets and the half-built swing waiting for its final touches. She crouched beside the frame, squinting at one of the bolts. It's a little loose here, she murmured. Hold it steady for me. I knelt opposite her, bracing the metal bar as she leaned closer with the wrench. The scent of her, faint jasmine and something earthy, mixed with the sharp smell of metal and sawdust. Her sleeve brushed my arm as she worked, the contact small but enough to make my pulse stumble. There, she said softly, tightening the last bolt with a twist of her wrist. Perfect. Her voice had that quiet satisfaction in it, the kind that makes you want to keep doing things just to hear it again. She sat back on her heels, looking at me with a smile that wasn't quite amusement and wasn't quite gratitude, something in between. You've been patient, she said. Most people would have given up by now. I don't mind taking my time, I said. The words came out slower than I intended, carrying a weight that wasn't just about the swing. For a second, neither of us moved. The space between us felt full, not crowded, just full. The kind of stillness that happens right before something shifts. Then she reached out to brush away a small streak of dirt across my forearm, her fingers light, deliberate. The touch was innocent enough, but it wasn't the action that made me forget to breathe, it was the pause afterward. Her hand stayed there, just a moment longer than necessary, and when her eyes lifted to meet mine, there was no pretense left. The world went quiet. Even the crickets seemed to fade. Her fingertips trailed back slowly, leaving a ghost of warmth behind. I wanted to say something, a joke, a question, anything, but the air between us didn't feel like it wanted words. She looked away first, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. You're going to think I'm silly, she said, almost to herself. Why? For caring so much about something as small as a swing, she murmured. But it's strange, isn't it? Sometimes you pour your heart into little things because they're easier to fix than the big ones. That made me look at her, really look. There was a softness behind her composure now, a kind of tired grace that came from carrying things she never talked about. I don't think it's silly, I said quietly. Maybe that's the point, to find something that reminds you life still moves, even if slowly. She smiled then, that same quiet smile that never seemed to reach her eyes fully, but still managed to warm me. You really do talk like a writer, she teased gently. I just listen a lot, I said. And in that moment, she reached for the swing, testing its movement. It swayed gently, creaking under her touch, a small, perfect sound in the dark. When she turned back to me, the porch light caught her eyes, and something unspoken passed between us, something fragile, steady, and new. We didn't touch again after that, but the warmth of her hand lingered on my skin long after she'd pulled away. And as she looked at the swing, smiling softly to herself, I knew it wasn't the metal or the bolts that held it together, it was everything we hadn't said. By the time the last bolt was secure and the swing finally hung steady, the world had gone still. Night had fully settled in, wrapping the yard in soft shadows and the low chorus of crickets. The porch light glowed behind her, throwing a halo over her shoulders and turning every edge of her hair to gold. I straightened, stretching my back, and exhaled. "We actually did it," I said with a small laugh. She smiled, a slow, tired, genuine one. "You doubted us?" "I doubted the manual," I replied. "Not the company." Her laugh was quiet, but it stayed in the air a little longer than it should have. Then she looked up at the swing, hands resting on her hips, a small sigh escaping her. "I can't even remember the last time I built something with someone," she said softly. That line caught me, not the words, but the way she said them. Like it had just slipped out, without permission. There was a melancholy hiding in her voice, faint but unmistakable. I wanted to ask about it, but instead, she turned toward the porch. "You're not leaving yet, are you? I owe you at least a drink." "I wouldn't say no to that," I said, following her up the steps. She poured 2 cups of tea, chamomile, the scent calm and faintly sweet. We sat across from each other at the small wooden table on her porch, the light above us soft and golden. The rest of the street was quiet. Just the hum of night and the gentle clink of ceramic as she set her cup down. "Thank you," she said after a moment, her tone quiet, sincere. "Not just for the swing. For staying." I looked at her, surprised by the way the word staying lingered. "It's nothing," I said. "I didn't have anywhere better to be." She smiled, but it was small, almost sad. "That's the thing," she whispered. "People always have somewhere else to be." Her eyes dropped to her cup, fingers tracing the rim slowly. For the first time, she looked uncertain, not in control, not guarded, just human in that raw, delicate way that only comes out when the night feels safe enough to hold it. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I knew that whatever she was carrying, it had weight. And I didn't want her to carry it alone, not tonight. "It's nice," I said softly, having someone to talk to when the world finally quiets down. She looked up, meeting my eyes, the kind of look that holds too long, not because you want to break it, but because you can't. The porch light flickered slightly, and the glow reflected in her pupils made them look like molten amber. Her voice came barely above a whisper. "It's been a long time since someone stayed past sunset." The words sank into me, simple, but heavy. There was something almost confessional in them. I wanted to tell her that I understood, that I knew what loneliness sounded like when it hid behind casual smiles. Instead, I just said, "Maybe you should get used to it." She blinked, her lips parting slightly, surprised. Then a slow, real smile curved across her face, the kind of smile that didn't just reach her eyes, it changed them. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The night didn't rush us. It just let us exist there, 2 people who hadn't planned on sharing anything beyond a task, now sitting beneath the same small light, both a little less alone than they'd been that morning. And when she finally spoke again, her tone was soft enough to almost be lost in the hum of the night. "I'm glad you didn't." I didn't have to ask what she meant. Because I was, too. The tea had gone cold by the time we realized how long we'd been talking. The porch light buzzed softly above us, casting a warm pool of gold that barely reached the steps. Beyond it, the yard had dissolved into a blur of shadow and moonlight. The swing hung still, its chains glinting faintly under the soft glow. She leaned back in her chair, cradling the empty mug in her hands. "You know," she said after a quiet stretch, "I almost canceled today." "Really?" I asked, glancing up. She nodded. It felt odd. Asking you for help. I wasn't sure if I was doing it because I actually needed someone, or because I just wanted someone around. Her honesty caught me off guard, not because of what she said, but because of how easily it slipped out now. The confidence she wore so effortlessly earlier had softened, replaced by something gentler, truer. I didn't rush to fill the silence. The night had a rhythm to it, slow and forgiving, the kind of space that makes truth sound less frightening. "I'm glad you didn't cancel," I said finally. She smiled faintly, eyes still on her cup. "Yeah," she whispered, almost to herself. "So am I." For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the street and the faint creak of the swing moving in the wind. She looked out toward it, her expression unreadable. Then she rose, setting her mug aside, and walked to the edge of the porch. The night wrapped around her like it knew her name. She turned slightly, glancing back at me, her voice carrying softly through the cool air. "It's just you and me tonight." The words weren't flirtatious, not even bold. They were simple, quiet, but full of meaning. Like she wasn't just stating a fact, but making peace with it. Something about the way she said it made the world shrink to that single moment. The swing, the light, her silhouette framed against the dark. Everything else, the street, the week, the noise of life, faded until it was only her voice echoing faintly in my chest. I stood, moving to join her. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The air between us felt charged, but not heavy. It was a kind of stillness that didn't demand movement, it simply existed, alive with unspoken things. She turned to face me, her expression soft, almost searching. The light caught the faint sheen in her eyes, not tears, but something close. "You don't have to go yet," she said quietly. I nodded, my voice low. "I wasn't planning to." Her smile deepened, and for the first time all evening, it reached her completely. She stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the faint brush of her sleeve against mine. The smallest touch, but it rooted me there. The silence held us, warm and fragile. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, and then the world was still again. Her eyes met mine, steady and calm. "You're easy to be around," she said. "That's rare." For a moment, I couldn't find words. The honesty of it, the simple, quiet way she said it, carried more weight than anything else could. So I just said, "You make it easy." We stood there like that, under the porch light, with nothing but the swing moving softly in the wind. No promises, no confessions. Just two people who'd found something they didn't know they were looking for, stillness, comfort, and the kind of closeness that doesn't ask for more. And as she looked back at the swing, smiling faintly, I realized that her words weren't an invitation, they were a truth. It was just us tonight. And somehow, that felt exactly right. The next morning broke gently, pale sunlight spilling through the trees, the kind that warms everything it touches without demanding to be noticed. The air smelled of dew and earth, and somewhere down the street, someone was mowing a lawn. The ordinary rhythm of life had returned, but somehow, everything felt quietly different. I stood at my window for a while before walking over. Her yard was visible from where I lived, calm, almost untouched, except for the faint motion of the swing moving lazily in the breeze. I smiled without meaning to. When I reached her gate, I found her already outside. She was in a soft gray sweater, hair tied loosely, a mug in hand. The sight felt domestic in a way that stirred something deep, not desire, not infatuation, but warmth. Familiarity. "Morning," I said, leaning against the fence. She turned, smiling like she'd been expecting me. "Morning," she replied. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Wanted to see if our masterpiece survived the night." She chuckled, sipping her coffee. "Still standing. Maybe a little crooked, but I kind of like that about it." I stepped closer, and she handed me the extra mug she'd been holding. "You made me coffee." "I did. Thought you earned it." The steam curled between us, carrying that soft, roasted scent that somehow blended perfectly with the crisp morning air. We stood side by side, watching as her niece, who must have arrived early, ran barefoot across the grass, her laughter echoing like wind chimes. "She loves it," I said quietly, watching the little girl leap onto the swing. "She does," she murmured. "She hasn't stopped smiling since she saw it." The swing creaked rhythmically, the chains singing their own quiet song. It was such a simple sound, yet something about it filled the whole yard, filled us. Her niece called out something we couldn't quite hear, and she laughed, waving back. When she turned to me again, her eyes were soft. "You know," she said, "you didn't just help me build that swing. You brought something back into this house." "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her voice gentling. "It's been quiet here for a long time. Too quiet. I forgot what it was like to have warmth. Laughter. Someone around who isn't just passing by." I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at her, really looked, the lines near her eyes that deepened when she smiled, the ease in her shoulders that hadn't been there yesterday. She looked lighter somehow, like the night had unburdened her a little. "I think it's the other way around," I said finally. "You reminded me that it's okay to slow down. To stay." Her smile lingered for a long moment, and then she looked toward the swing again. The little girl's laughter rose and fell, weaving through the quiet morning like sunlight through leaves. For a while, we didn't talk. We just stood there, watching something simple, something pure. The swing moved back and forth, steady, graceful, alive. She set her mug down, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I guess we built more than a swing set, didn't we?" she said softly. I nodded, eyes on the small figure still laughing under the morning light. "Yeah," I whispered. "We did." The breeze picked up again, carrying the scent of coffee and lilac from her garden. And in that ordinary, golden morning, no grand words, no promises, there was peace. Just the quiet comfort of knowing that something real had begun the day before, beneath the trees, between two people who had finally learned how to stay.